as we continue to cover the in-depth lore and timeline of Godzilla 2014, we arrive at the story of the MUTOs. From their discovery to the destruction of Janjira and kicking off the events of Godzilla 2014, today we will be continuing our Godzilla 2014 deep dives. As the MonsterVerse continues to expand, the lore and timeline of this universe have gotten so complicated, especially when you factor in the amount of misinformation and fan canon being spread. In this series, we continue my breakdowns of the MonsterVerse as it was truly intended. In order to do this, we have to build the timeline of the absolute canon, which means we have to take a look at each individual film separately by themselves. Special features will be considered in order to support these discussions while keeping in mind their limited relevance and overall lack of canon. In order to build the proper MonsterVerse timeline, I have paused and read every newspaper, every bit of redacted text, every single bit of screen data presented in the film, and for now we continue to build out Godzilla 2014 before jumping into the rest of the MonsterVerse films and finishing off the MonsterVerse timeline in release date order. Today I will take you from the 1950s all the way up until the events of Godzilla 2014. Our next event happens on March 15th, 1959. An unknown object is captured on sonar. Following this, high levels of toxic lead were later found in the waters throughout the nearby city. There is no location given. Between the 1950s to the 1970s, the US military reports to the US government that Monarch was invaluable in tracking Godzilla, locating him, and urges them to continue funding for Monarch moving forward. Continued nuclear testing is described later as attempts to kill Godzilla. However, it is confirmed that the only test used against Godzilla directly was Castle Bravo. Continued testing may have been a way to further develop weapons that they could use to combat creatures like Godzilla in the future, rather than direct attempts to kill him. Monarch continues to discover evidence of other massive creatures in the form of fossils and cave paintings around the world, connecting them to different mythologies and stories. In 1977, the Zuiyo-Maru catches a strange corpse off the coast of New Zealand. This strange find is called the Zuiyo-Maru carcass. The 400-pound carcass is confirmed to be a dinosaur that had been dead for about 30 days. Some pseudoscientists in the MonsterVerse tried to warn that this was a basking shark. Leading up to 1999, an undisclosed Monarch event took place titled Latitude 44. Ishiro Serizawa becomes a famous paleontologist who proposed a theory that prehistoric creatures may have burrowed towards the Earth's core, allowing them to survive an extinction event. Dr. Ishiro Serizawa is then recruited into Monarch and becomes a high-ranking member. He carries around a pocket watch passed down from his father. That father who, again, in this film's canon, is never stated to be a founding member of Monarch. The watch has been frozen in time at 8:15 a.m. on August 6, 1945. In 1997, Dr. Graham joins Monarch and becomes an apprentice and partner to Dr. Serizawa. In 1999, the event in the Philippines begins. Universal Western Mining, a company operating in the Philippines, detects a radiation pocket under the ground. Excited they have a uranium deposit, they start stacking up heavy machinery. The weight causes a catastrophic disaster as the ground collapses beneath them, taking down about 40 miners. In the process, it reveals an ancient tomb with fossilized remains inside. Other miners begin suffering intense radiation poisoning and burns as a result of their proximity to the cave. Over in Janjira, Japan, a city located on the eastern coast of Japan near Tokyo, a nuclear engineer named Joe Brody picks up seismic readings from the Philippines, indicating an earthquake has occurred. Back in the Philippines, radiation levels spike as the cavern comes in contact with the outside air, catalyzing the gestation period of a spore growing inside the bones. One of the two spores growing inside the bones hatches, releasing an unknown MUTO hatchling into the wild. This creature erupts upward through the ground until it escapes into the ocean, burrowing underground and traveling northeast toward Japan. Back in Janjira, Japan, Joe Brody picks up evidence of this as a subsequent earthquake in the Philippines. What initially looks like an aftershock soon becomes a concern as a series of smaller tremors begins tracking across the Pacific Ocean, heading right toward Japan. Joe puts the Janjira nuclear power plant on high alert as the series of tremors might strike the facility. Over in the Philippines, upon the discovery of massive radioactive bones in the ground, Monarch is called to investigate. Following an initial investigation, Dr. Jerry Boyd requests enlists Dr. Serizawa and Dr. Graham to assist. They arrive later that day. While exploring the cave, Dr. Graham suspects these bones are Godzilla himself. However, Serizawa confirms it is a creature much older. Based on the size of the bones, it seems this creature was much longer and taller as well. They discover a dormant spore inside the bones that has spread to the roof of the cave. It is attached to the second spore, the one that already hatched. In Janjira, Joe continues to track the strange seismic readings as they approach, noticing that they don't follow regular random and jagged readings associated with earthquakes. Instead, they are near parabolic and consistent from one tremor to the next. They are a pattern. Joe calls an emergency meeting to discuss shutting down the power plant before the unexplained frequency patterning reaches Janjira. To ensure this isn't a technological mistake causing problems, he sends his wife Sandra down to level 5 to check their sensors detecting the readings. The readings increase in frequencies, starting what seems to be days apart and escalating until they are minutes apart. They discover Janjira is the only facility detecting these readings, and there is no discernible epicenter. The MUTO arrives in Japan, striking the power plant in what seems to be an earthquake, causing a breach to reactor number 2 that results in a massive radiation leak. Joe is forced to close the containment doors, saving the city from the radiation leaking to the public, but killing his wife in the process. Moments later, the MUTO begins nesting inside the power plant, looking to feed upon the nuclear reactors inside, causing the enormous facility to crumble. Ford Brody, Joe and Sandra Brody's son, watches from his school. Janjira is evacuated immediately after this incident. The entire city is quarantined and it becomes illegal to enter. The government claims they failed to contain the radiation leak and that the area is uninhabitable. A report claims the government is looking into ways to release contaminated water back into the ocean. Dr. Serizawa steps forward as an acoustic expert during this time and debunks the strange noises detected by people in the area, as saying they were caused by the series of earthquakes that hit the Pacific and eventually the power plant. Between 1999 and 2014, over the next 15 years, Joe fails to put back the pieces of his life, becoming increasingly obsessed with what happened in Janjira, becoming aware that there is a massive government cover-up. This drives a wedge between him and Ford, who leaves to join the US Navy. Monarch continues to grow over time, with Serizawa climbing the ranks until he becomes one of the leaders of the organization. Serizawa's official position is lead Monarch biologist. Dr. Graham's official position is lead Monarch paleozoologist. Monarch establishes an outpost in the Philippines over the MUTO site. Scans of the bones are revealed to be a Godzilla-like creature with a bear-like skull. It's labeled Species 5146, Adam, marked uncatalogued. The skeleton seems skinnier than Godzilla's, but supports the same defining dorsal plates, although much smaller and much more jagged than Godzilla's. Further reports document Species 5146_A9005, specimen 9901. This creature is codenamed Godzilla. I do find it interesting that Adam is a member of species 5146, while Godzilla is a member of species 5146_A9. Does this help explain how later on, Legendary is no longer allowed to show Godzilla's species on screen? And recent novelizations have even gone as far as to refer to other members of Godzilla's species as Godzilla-like creatures? I think that that could be the case. Using this deep cut, I think we can explain that Godzilla is simply a very special member of his species. While the Godzilla species did and does exist within the MonsterVerse, they are not Godzilla, and none of them were quite like he was. Monarch establishes an outpost in the Janjira nuclear power plant. Here they study the MUTO's cocoon, which is attached to the main nuclear reactor in the plant. By 2000, the MUTO's cocoon had been completed, and radiation levels on the surface had dropped back to normal levels. They determine killing the MUTO will unleash radiation across the city and beyond, and determine it's best to wait for the MUTO to drain the radiation from the core. Monarch erects a containment grid around the MUTO's nest made of high-powered electric projectiles. Determining the Spore is dead, Monarch gives the dormant MUTO Spore to the US government, who takes it to Nevada's National Security Site, a laboratory meant to house radioactive waste. A series of undisclosed Monarch events takes place. They are called Tsunami Select, Christmas in Micronesia, Operation Dead Drop, and Previex GI. Janjira becomes wildly overrun with plant life and becomes a flourishing ecosystem. Ford Brody becomes an EOD technician and marries a woman named Elle Brody. In 2008, Joe Brody moves back to Tokyo and over the next few years makes multiple attempts to break into the quarantine zone and is arrested each time. Joe begins connecting the dots, first discovering evidence that multiple government agencies are involved in covering up the Janjira disaster and tracking it back to different cover-ups. These cover-ups include the 1954 Castle Bravo test in the South Pacific. A reporter named Jessica Hales tries to discover what's happening inside the quarantine zone, but is ultimately unable to get inside as she's warned of the intense police presence, and as she gets closer to the barrier, she sees armed guards inside. Ford and Elle Brody have a son named Sam. In 2013, Ford is deployed. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, I really appreciate your support. I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. It is through the support of the patrons on Patreon that I'm able to continue to make videos like this for you in the first place. If you want to support the Patreon, you can use the link in the description below where you can get early access to content, access to the Discord community, and more. If that's not your thing, please consider joining as a channel member. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you all next time for the next one. D-Man out.